So for this Friday's Fight Chat Friday, we're going to do something a little bit different, and we're going to focus on a type of match, a little bit of a mismatch between a shorter fighter and a taller fighter. In this case, we're going to pick some scenes from the 2019 World Championships in Inzell, Germany, minus 57 kilos senior male division, where we had Axel Vargas from Argentina against Andrey Lee from Russia. And there is a very noticeable height difference in the between the two fighters. For our clips, we've taken some video from Master Johan da Silva's TKD Tekkers YouTube channel. So if you'd like to see the fight in full and in context, head on over there to check that out. We'd also give a shout out to Master da Silva, who's just released a new app, which under these COVID-19 conditions might be a great way to keep up your Taekwondo training, give you some new ideas, and just keep the motivation going. So we'll just jump into the first little bit of this fight, where we can clearly see, you know, Andrey's the taller fighter, he's Russian, and Axel's the smaller fighter there, the Argentinian. And we can see right away, just by virtue of Andrey's height, his kicks will tend to come in higher. We're probably going to see that elbow to shoulder height kick as a default, unless he really focuses on it. And Axel has chosen, you know, as a smaller fighter, to stay lower, and it's kind of exaggerating the height difference. But what it does do is it kind of encourages Andrey to kick a little higher than he means to, and it gives Axel the opportunity to come under the leg here and challenge, and not give up as much ground as he might otherwise do to avoid the kick.
I like it there. It's quite good from Axel to come under that, I think. And as you said there as well, the fact that Axel's stance is actually quite longer there as well makes him even appear smaller, I guess. So yeah, it's a nice little way to come underneath that, because if he starts to give Andrea any, I guess, invitation to invite that kick to continue on, he's going to be under pressure and he's going to start to pick up warnings and things like that. So I think it's a good tactic earlier on, just to get rid of those testing kicks, the first ones that are just kind of almost just trying to test Axel and to see how he reacts. So he almost just cancelled those out, and I think it's a good thing to do, especially against somebody who's taller. So you don't want to give them a little bit of momentum to build on and to get a run on you.
I think exactly that, and you want to kind of send a signal early on that you cannot kick for free. You can't put out your leg for free. You have to take into consideration that I might throw a counter and nick a score off you. And if you're the taller fighter going in there, the last thing you want to be doing is chasing a small, agile, mobile fighter around that ring, being careful with your fouls and so on, and trying to, you know, to track somebody in the ring. It can become a very, very big ring when the other person has a lead and wants to move. And the second kind of clip we're looking at is another use of around that leg, and we can see again very low, but the change in stance here, and he gets under the leg to bring himself in. So not just on the defensive side, but tempting Andrey to pick the leg up, even here just to clash, and then using the turning kick to come under the leg and go through. It's it's two uses of the exact same body positioning and technique.
Definitely, yeah. And you know what, like, Axel is known for kind of being, I guess, a showman and flashy, and you can see him here playing with the glove, and I think that's great for people who are watching on this. Axel, it's great to see him doing that and all that, but there's definitely a little bit of substance to that, because you can see he's using that to distract Andre with what's going on up on a higher level, and he's able to adjust his feet to kind of almost set up that double, triple turning kick, whatever it is, to get a little bit of a different look on it, you know. So it's very clever by him, and I think that kind of almost like the name he has of being that flashy, flamboyant type of fighter is actually very it plays into his favor that he's allowed to do these things and get away with these other little subtle things that if he didn't do those tricks and whatever, that people would take more notice of.
Yeah, and I mean, the way that we're watching it here, it almost looks for Axel like you're watching something that's strobe lit, you know, where it's almost jerky. And the way he's moving his feet, it creates kind of a jerky motion. It's unusual to the eye. But what he has done in terms of his hand movement, his foot movement, is he's changed his body position from like 25 degrees forward to vertical to 25 degrees back. And like when he's forward, he's well positioned to go and go to hands directly. And Andrey has to respect that. He's got to keep the stance long, keep his body back, and he has to respect that, you know, that smaller fighter with the lower center of gravity might be pushing through and under my range and into the hands. And it keeps him respectful of the distance. But then, you know, that quick little adjustment to the back foot, all of a sudden the body's vertical, then it's 20 degrees back and he can push in. Now, yeah, you'd probably say it's lucky he's gone under the leg, and he hasn't really managed to capitalize and get a score here. Like, he's just been wrapped up in the hands as he's gone in. But still, the concept is good. It's like, without even moving the front foot there, he has actually changed his distance to Andrey. And the control of distance between two fighters when the height is a factor, like, it's really, really important. And I think, you know, you've seen a little bit of nuance there from Axel in terms of how he has changed the distance without, as you said, moving that front foot. He hasn't changed the distance in real terms where the front foot is, but what he can do with the distance has changed because he's moved his back leg. But
yeah, and you can see Andrey is quite low there as well in that clip. So he's doing all the right things. Like, Andrey is trying to keep long, and he's trying to keep Axel at bay and not to be almost like pulled off a shot and easily countered. But I'd like to see him just be a little bit more aggressive on his own front leg, just to keep Axel a little bit more busy. But we could actually see that from the last clip there as well, that when Axel did get to the hands, that is one of the things that when you're the smaller fighter that you have to be careful, because you're coming in quite low, and you're almost looking up, and it's one of the hard things about being the smaller fighter. You see here, he's quite low with the hands, and you almost get trapped underneath the shoulder and the elbow of the other fighter, which is, it's very tricky to get off any decent punches and get a return on them, really, because you're kind of coming up and not putting any real substance on them because you don't know what's going on. And that's one of the challenges for being the shorter fighter when it gets the hand. So you have to make sure that when you get in there that you're trying to get that head up nice and tall and find the target.
Yeah. Another kind of strategy as we go into this clip, I really think that at this point Axel is looking to draw the hands out of Andrey, and Andrey is refused all the way through the first round. He is not going to hands. He's keeping that distance long. He's not getting caught on that blitz. He's like, it's a very level match at this stage. I think it's 1-1 on the scoreboard. There's not an awful lot going on, you know, in the scores. It's not an open match. It doesn't flow that way. But you can see as Axel shortens the distance, he's inviting an attack. You know, he's putting his head there. His head isn't covered. It's just above like Andrey's hip level. You know, you'd be thinking, is Andrey going to go to legs, to hands? What's he going to do? And it's affording Axel the opportunity to jump the leg if Andrey tries to kick, or if Andrey's come to hands, he's still got such a long stance. He's huge time stored up in that stance to make a defensive side kick or back kick. You know, it's taunting is what it is. And I think Andrey, you know, you can't. Yeah, exactly. And you can't kind of take it away from Andrey that he's not being drawn in. He's being patient. But like you said, I'd like him to be a little bit more challenging here, you know, to place threats open side, blind side, you know, to go from hip to shoulder to head, and put the threats there, and maybe even be a little bit more proactive in his footwork to pull something out of Axel, to get a reaction, because Axel's been able to be, you know, able to go from quite stationary. He's been able to dictate or control the distance in this fight for the most part, even though he's not getting a return on the scoreboard.
Yeah, and in that clip at the very start, you can see here, one of the advantages of being the taller fighter is, right here you see it, if Andrey is able to put his foot on top of Axel's glove, because Axel is so low and in a deep stance, we'll just wait for it to come around here, if he can place his leg on the top of his glove, it stops Axel any way through with his hands, and it also cuts off any really decent counter that he can make, and it gives Andrey a nice advantage to push the momentum and push Axel on the back foot. So that's a little tactic you can use if you're the bigger guy and somebody is really low on the stance and they have that front hand out inviting, waiting for you to make a move. If you can trap that glove and get your big toe around it, it stops the hands for Axel. He can't really counter with the hands. And it also, because then if you push with that, for a second, Axel is going to be kind of caught and he won't be able to counter too easily either due to balance with his leg. So that's something you can employ if you're the bigger guy and you notice a similar kind of sequence appearing.
And I think as we go towards this next one, we can kind of see where Andrey starts to think some of those, or take some of those things, you know, and put them into practice, where he starts to mix and vary the ranges and change up his stance and how he sets up the side kick. And I think this was essential that to maintain and you know, right through the match. So between varying the stance, a little bit more active in his footwork and in his stance here, he's shortening before going, he's going in singles and doubles, and even going into the turning kick as well here right at the beginning. And that then threatens open side and blind side a little bit. I'd still like to see a bit more variation in the height and a little bit more variation in the depth of the kick to make Axel really work. But, you know, it definitely in this case, you'd say, right, this is the first time where our first clip we've shown where Andrey's really the one who's dictating the pace, the tempo, the distance, and looking like he might be the one to make something happen. But the flip side of that, as he's pushed back, Axel's doing a very good job of regaining the centre without really putting on any drastic pressure, but he's not giving up any more ground than he needs to. And he's, if there's a little bit of a slow drop, or if there's a break in the rhythm, he's forcing Andrey to respect his front leg a little bit.
Absolutely. And that's something that, like, a lot of time when you're the smaller, you'll hear people say, oh, pull him around and do lots of moving and draw him out. But I think that's something that's people don't really put much interest in, of using your own front leg still. And it's something that Axel does really well here, that you can't really give up your own front leg because it stops any momentum. And it also kind of keeps the other side and the bigger guy honest in terms of it keeps him busy and has something to worry about. So I would definitely, if I was the smaller guy, I would stick with that plan of using my own front leg where I could and threaten with the hip. I think the hip is a nice place to go with that if you're the shorter guy. But then you got to be careful then as well not to stay on that line too long, because that's where Andrey wants to fight. He's not really looking to be chasing angles and following up really too much here. So if you can draw that out by mixing up that front leg side kick, being the shorter guy, and pulling some angles like we kind of see here, a little bit of footwork and things like that, that's the trick, I guess. Like for me, when I was in particular like team sparring, if I ever had to fight a shorter guy, you're very conscious of being drawn out and over committing and being easily countered because of the speed difference, I guess. So it's something you got to be aware of, certainly. And I'd like to see Andrey kind of having maybe a tighter guard with his hands and just maybe committing a little bit more with the legs and squeezing that space. I think warnings could have been a big thing there for Andrey that he didn't really use in his favour. And I think you mentioned that. I think it was a one warning in the entire match, and that's something that I would definitely be looking to. Yeah, I'd be looking to definitely to squeeze a little bit more space there if I was the bigger guy, and to, because the minute you can squeeze the space, he has to react somehow. He's not going to just go out of the ring all the time. So then you're flipping the tide in a way, and you're getting Axel or the shorter guy to maybe commit to something, and that can be where you can pick up some of your points.
Yeah, I think what's interesting in this clip as well is that, you know, Axel gets an awful lot of mileage out of his footwork and his willingness to just stand in a space and not react, because he doesn't have to react. There's nothing happening to react to. And there you go, is that little short shot onto the hip that is just sometimes there. But he's... Yeah, I think what he's looking to do there with the little bit of, and there's a few other examples of it, but the little bit of testing right and left off the line is, well, if Andrey does commit straight and Axel's off that line, then something's on the cards. There is a shot available, and that's often where Axel is at his best, is if he can pull off the line, and Andrey doesn't bite. You know, he's still sitting there, he's still waiting, and it's a brinksmanship kind of thing. It's a game of chicken now, and as a coach, these are fights I hate to coach. They're you know, because the longer the fight goes on and the longer the fight is level, the more difficult it is to encourage your fighter, or to have your fighter be the one who's going to take the first risk. So sometimes it's like, look, if we think the fight's going to go that way, let's get it messy in the first round. You know, let's get it messy earlier, because, you know, there's very few fighters who want the fight to be like this for 4 minutes. Yeah, it's a very tough concentration game at that stage. Let's just go to an example of Axel being backed into a corner. So this is where, like you were saying, Andrey should be getting purchased. Like Axel, with this height difference, should be spending a lot more time resident in that back corner, or in one of the back corners. And you know, you would definitely say there should be a lot more coming by way of warnings. You know, Andrey should have been able to push an advantage at this stage just by way of the warnings, but it hasn't come yet. Now, I do think myself personally, Axel has stepped out on 2 occasions in that sequence, you know, where as he backs up, the left leg there just does step onto the red. And it's here as the leg lifts, and then here as the leg lifts again to come in. You know, the referee could step in and give a warning there. In effect, it wouldn't have made any difference. But, you know, for me, I think that's definitely the basis of the strategy. You want Andrey to be in this position for far more of the match.
Definitely, yeah. And I think you can see it here really well that if Andrey had like a tighter guard with his hands, I think he would have got a lot more purchase in this particular sequence, because you can see his hands are quite loose here, so there's still a threat. But if he was able to just hold that guard nice and tight and to do exactly what he did do, I think he actually would have got much more of a return there and maybe squeeze a bit more space, because Axel would have had to respect that, and he would have maybe there is a risk here of maybe getting punched as well. So, and as well, like, it would have been harder for Axel to counter anything to the body, I guess. So it would have been a much better thing to do if you're the bigger guy there and squeeze that space. Again, we see what we talked about earlier of Axel getting through with the hands, but again, being the shorter guy, it's not very easy to get those clear punches off.
No. And you know, as messy as it is, you know, this punch on the way back out is, you know, that left hand there is actually what separates this whole fight. So as they go into this corner, it's still sitting at 1-1. It's 1-0 to Axel on one card, and I think 2-0 to Andrey on another card. And that 1 point is enough to pull a couple of cards in his favour. And you'll see as they come out of it and into the last sequence, then Axel has to become a whole different fighter and chase. And Andrey becomes like, and I'd imagine this is how Andrey wanted to fight the whole fight. You know, it's being able to catch the shorter fighter coming forward, make use of that length in his stance, those very long arms, and you know, and counter fight really.
That's not really often you see the bigger guy being the counter fighter, and if you are the bigger guy and you want to counter fight, I think you kind of have to make it happen, and it's something that Andrey didn't really make happen, I guess, and it was in his control to maybe to push that a little bit more, but obviously he was quite patient and he didn't want to give away anything stupid. I mean, was this the quarterfinal of the World Championships? I think it was. Yeah, so exactly that. So he doesn't want to give anything away there, and he's happy to have maybe a less entertaining bout, but get the win still. I think that's the important thing here, especially at a World Championships level. It's all about getting through at the end of the day. It's not about looking sharp and flashy as opposed to other tournaments. If you have to win ugly, you have to win ugly, especially in Euros and Worlds, I think.
Yeah, and for me, I think, like, when I watch back a match like that, what I'm looking at is I'm thinking, okay, who had more to gain by having the distance closer? Who had more to gain by taking the tempo down as slow as it was? And, you know, and the reason that the match can be in some ways a bit confusing for me is I would be looking at that and saying, I don't think Andrey had anything to gain by having the tempo of the match that low. Not until he's in the lead. And so for me, I would be saying, look, the initiative is with you. You need to be raising the tempo of this, Andrey, to create enough movement, enough pressure to have Axel back working on the edge of the ring where the mistakes can happen, the spins can be clipped and you can fall over, or you can end up with that back foot out of the ring. And I think the impetus was really with Andrey to do that bit of work, and it didn't really happen. It didn't come out of it. Whereas vice versa, I'm looking at like Axel and how he's shortened the distance and kept the tempo down. And I do think that's actually in his favour in this case, only because he's coming from that lower centre of gravity, and he is the one that was dictating the distance an awful lot of the time. It means he has the jump. Like, you're reacting to him. He goes, you react. So being shorter, being the one that's deciding how slow it is or how fast it is, he gets to go first. And then it's just a case of, has Andrey enough in the stance and in his chamber to keep things safe? And for this match, he did. You know, there was enough there. He didn't get drawn into it.
I think those things that we spoke about before of being in control of the ring position, being in control of the distance, and being in control of the tempo. I think there was nobody who really kind of took control of any of these in particular in this match, apart from the tempo. I think that they were both happy to have that lower tempo, especially. I guess that Andrey didn't want to overcommit and fall into anything kind of silly or anything. So maybe there's something to be said for having the tempo down there, but maybe he felt Axel maybe had a speed advantage or something. So yeah, but I think like carrying that respect level in beforehand is something that kind of swings the match in a particular way as well. And maybe what the fighter is because of YouTube or Facebook, Instagram clips or whatever, maybe not how they fight really because of at the top level as well. So maybe there's something to be said for that, you know, and maybe impacts the strategy and the game plan that people have.
Yeah, definitely. I suppose the final bit is that, you know, I would look at that, and I would love to give that fight out to a couple of my athletes just as a pointer, because, you know, if there's a certain work rate that's kind of required, if you don't have a particular work rate, you're going to find yourself in matches like this where one warning or a quick, you know, a minus point from a referee, or you know, someone picking up a, you know, a flash score, you know, a little back fist or something, it just turns the whole fight in its head. And you know, a low work rate does tend to leave you in those positions more often, and it only takes the smallest little lapse of concentration for that to happen. So I would always encourage the fighters to have a higher work rate, I think, than that.
Yeah. And that's something like completely in your control. I mean, you can control how hard you work and how much intensity you bring to the match, regardless of what the opponent is doing. You know, so I think that fight was crying out for somebody to take control of it, and it just never really came to fruition. So yeah, I think, as I said earlier, both guys are probably a little bit conscious of each other and respected each other from. I don't know if they fought before. I'm not so sure, but there was certainly a sense of respect there, that they didn't want to overcommit and give away anything too easily.
Yeah, definitely. So I think we'll finish there with that particular fight. And again, if people have topics they'd like us to cover, maybe we can go and find relevant fights or clips from relevant fights to explore a topic. Or again, indeed, if people have particular fights they'd like to have us chat through and break down, we're more than happy to do it. Great way to spend a Friday. And if you haven't as yet, please make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. And today, by all means, go and check out TKD Tekkers, who were kind enough to share the video with us.